Hi, everybody. Today is Tuesday, September 30th, 2025, and our friend Professor Marandi is joining us and he's here with us. Welcome, Professor.
Thank you very much, Nima. Thank you for inviting me. It's always a pleasure.
Let me start, Professor, with the visit of the Iranian president together with his team, the foreign minister. They went to the United States, they talked with the media on the right and the left, but the main message was the negotiations, the talks. And here is what President Pezeshkian said on Fox News.
No place for nuclear weapons or any type of weapons of mass destruction. The unfounded accusations that they're blowing out of proportion is unacceptable. We've never sought nuclear weapons. We never will seek nuclear weapons. But if Mr. Trump if his scope is for us not to have any nuclear weapons, that was easily obtainable. There was never any tangible proof that we were seeking nuclear weapons. Therefore, they use that as an excuse to carry out an attack that they should not have.
Professor Marandi, looking at what President Pezeshkian said and what the behavior of Europeans together with the United States, do they really want to negotiate? Do they really want to talk?
No, no. The intention is not real negotiations. It's not to talk. Uh, they are deeply under the influence of Zionists and the neocons, and of course, the neocons and the Zionists are the same. They have shown that they do not have any goodwill. When the Iranians agreed to indirectly negotiate with the United States, they knew that the Americans and the Israeli regime were conspiring to attack them. I've heard people say online that the Iranians were deceived. No, that's not true. The Iranians knew there would be an attack. They miscalculated when uh, they didn't think that the Zionist regime would attack Iranian leaders and attack the leadership of the country. But the Americans were conspiring, and they were showing their deceit. And when the Israeli regime attacked, the Europeans supported it. The Canadians, the Australians, New Zealand, the collective West, they supported the attack on Iran. And I think it was the German chancellor who said that the Israeli regime does our dirty work for us. So I think that shows exactly where they stand. And then with regards to the snapback mechanism and the revival of the 6 UN Security Council resolutions that were passed many years ago, again, we saw the Europeans deceitful towards Iran. They basically told the Iranians that if you do A, B, C, that we will respond with flexibility. The Iranians knew they were lying, but the Iranians, just to show that they're lying, they agreed to a deal with the International Atomic Energy Agency in Cairo. Yet, despite that, the Europeans they bowed to the United States, as was expected in Tehran. And so, and every time the Europeans made a promise and the Iranians moved forward, it turned out that the Europeans were lying. Again, the Iranians knew what was happening, and it was not about being naive. The Iranians want that segment of Iranian society that is more naive, the liberals, the wealthy, some university students who are young and impressionable. They want them to be on board right now because we are entering a dangerous stage. We know that the Israeli regime will be planning another attack, and it could be quite soon. So the Iranians want the country united, and they also want the international community to see that the West is lying, that the West is deceitful. And this is not about the nuclear program. Again, we may see an attack soon on Iran, but Trump has already said that Iran's nuclear program has been obliterated. He said that many times. So, what would be the justification for attacking Iran? When the attack starts, again, you'll see the Europeans and the Americans and the Canadians and the Australians and New Zealand in the same camp. And you'll also see Erdogan's military installations that are being used by the Americans. They will be at the service of the Israeli regime. You will see Qatari military installations that are controlled by the United States at the service of the Israeli regime. You'll see across the Persian Gulf, US bases involved in helping the Israeli regime. It will be just like it was last time round. Jordan will allow the Israelis to use their airspace to both attack Iran and to defend. And of course, it will be just like what we saw last time, except for I think Iran will be much more assertive. The country is very united, and the West is much weaker today, and so is Israel, because the Israeli regime, because as we move forward, the Israeli regime is becoming more despised across the world. I'm at a conference right now outside of Iran, and you can see there's a consensus about the Israeli regime. It's despised, and this is only getting worse. And at home, Netanyahu is getting more unpopular. Israeli Zionists want the war to end, not because they're good people. Overwhelmingly, they're genocidal, according to their own polls. I'm not saying this as an accusation. That's what their polls say. But they're tired of the war. It's ruining their lives. It's ruining their future. So they want. So Netanyahu does not have popularity at home to continue the war. The economy is floundering. The world is increasingly growing hostile. They've lost American society. So, and the Iranians, of course, are going to be much more prepared this time round. They're not going to be. They've basically been learning from their shortcomings and their mistakes and miscalculations, and they're reorganizing and restructuring. So their offensive capabilities will be much better, and they'll be better equipped to protect themselves as well. So this time around, it could be a harsh, very harsh war. But the point is that the West will support the Israeli regime. It doesn't matter. They say that, okay, the nuclear program is obliterated, as Trump keeps saying. Whether that's true or not, that's beyond the point. But an attack on Iran will be supported by the West simply because it's Israel that does it. And no one should be surprised, because the Holocaust continues as you and I speak. Today, a lot of children were murdered. Last night, a lot of children were murdered. The attacks have intensified after Trump and Netanyahu spoke. So the Western media is indifferent. We see that TikTok is being purchased so that pro-Palestinian voices can be silenced. So when they're carrying out genocide, and Western journalists and elites and academics are all quiet or apologists, then no one should be surprised that the Israeli regime will strike Iran again, and the West will support it. There's nothing to be surprised about.
We've learned from what Iran's foreign minister, Dr. Araqchi, he said that the West, it seems that the United States has asked Iran to somehow to send their enriched uranium in order to postpone the snapback sanctions and all of this. But how the level of ignorance is somehow unbelievable. What's going on in the sort of talks they're doing? So what does that mean, the snapback sanctions for Iran, that the United States is putting some sort of, in my opinion, ridiculous offer to Iran?
Well, another thing that the Europeans said was that we want you to negotiate with Americans, and the Iranians agreed within the framework of the P5+1. But again, despite Iran's agreement, the Europeans went ahead with the snapback. So all this just proves who they are and how deceitful they are and how unreliable they are and how useless they are. But I think, Nima, the problem is that the West is now in a place where it has been exposed to everyone across the world. They have they have no regard for human rights. They have no regard for freedom. We see how pro-Palestinian supporters are being suppressed, how their voices are being silenced. We saw what happened to George Galloway and his wife, not just George, but also his wife.
Yeah.
We are seeing this happen across the Western world for the sake of what? For the sake of a genocidal, racist, ethno supremacist, colonial regime that's carrying out a Holocaust, an ethnic cleansing, and is openly racist. They're doing it for them. They're doing it all for them. So the West has zero clout. They've lost their soft power. They're losing their economic power. Their military power is not nearly what it used to be or what it claims to be, as we've seen both in with regards to in the Iran-Israel conflict, or the Israeli or in Ukraine. So they're in a very difficult situation, and the more they decline, the more dangerous they become, the more irrational they become, the more angry they become, and the more foolishly they behave. So we're facing a very dangerous, dangerous entity that is just lashing out. There's 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 no way that Iran can deal with this regime and the United States and the Europeans in a rational way. And I mean, for them to behave in a rational way, it's just not possible anymore. And that, I think, is something that has benefited Iranians and the state, because there's now a consensus in Iran. And sorry, I sort of drifted away from your question. There's a consensus in Iran now to work with the global South, to work with China, to work with Russia, to pursue Iran's interests and its national interests within the framework of BRICS and the Shanghai Cooperation Organization and other, uh, the Eurasian Economic Union and other such entities, because the West is a dead end. You cannot deal with them. No matter what you do, they're going to lash out at you, and they will support Zionism. So I think what it has done is that it has consolidated public opinion in Iran. It has made those who still were um, uh, pursuing what I would say, what I always thought was a mirage, and that was better ties with the West. It woke them up to reality, and I think that the way Iran negotiated with them and the agreements, I think it was the smart thing to do. We knew that and I think after the signing of the deal in Egypt, I think somewhere I did say that it's not going to succeed. Just like the indirect negotiations with the United States, we knew they weren't going to succeed. But we went through the motions just to show everyone, both at home and abroad, that that the problem doesn't lie in Tehran. And I think they've succeeded. I think that 4.5 decades of anti-Iranian propaganda has all been destroyed and has been swept away to a large degree during the last couple of years, but especially during the last couple of months. And those who are within the American camp, they've been exposed to their own people and others. Erdogan, Qatar, the 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 the, the Trump peace deal, which is disgusting and disgraceful. We see that Erdogan and Qatar and Egypt and others, they're supporting it. The Saudis, it is a capitulation. Instead of supporting the Palestinian people, they are supporting a plan where the resistance who knows what that means, is expelled from Gaza. And basically, it's controlled by who? Tony Blair. We all know who Tony Blair is, one of the most evil people on this planet. He began the slaughter of people in our region before this, the thugs around Trump and the governments in Europe were involved in this sort of thing. This was, we all know what happened in 2003. We all saw the protests in England, and then the subsequent this destruction of Iraq, Iran. And by the way, sometimes we see people on social media who are hostile towards Iran. Usually, it's the usual crowd, but they say that Iran supported the war in Iraq. Iran was opposed to it. I was actually at the anti-war protests I participated in the anti-war protests in the UK, and Iran was always against it. Iran tried to, when the Americans invaded, Iran infiltrated, but they did not at all support the Americans. They called it an illegitimate war. But Tony Blair back there lied about chemical weapons. He lied about Al Qaeda. And that was really the beginning of, or almost the beginning of this catastrophic chapter for West Asia and North Africa that has destroyed so many countries and so many lives. And so many people have moved to Europe as a result. And you see people in Europe protesting, but instead of targeting these poor refugees, they should target their own governments for destroying the lives of so many millions of people and forcing them to come to Europe.
From what we've heard from Iran's National Security Council, the head of Iran's National Security Council, Dr. Larijani, he said that Europeans were insisting because they wanted Iran to make a deal with IAEA, and then Iran did that, and then they changed the rhetoric. Then now you have to talk with the United States. Iran came with an offer that they can negotiate with 5+1, which were the main party to JCPOA. And I think the point that Iran is making, that the West was not interested. By the way, he said that the Europeans didn't answer to the proposal of Iran to negotiate with all of the countries involved in JCPOA. Iran doesn't have a positive. Is that the problem? Iran doesn't have a positive, you know, response from the United States with the negotiations, because when you look at the way that Witkoff was negotiating with Iran, every time he talked with Iranians, he came out and said something different. It wasn't at all related to what he has said during the negotiations. Does Iran trust the United States? Or let's put it this way, why Iran is pushing for other countries coming into the negotiations instead of just negotiating with the United States?
Well, I think that Iran has shown both to its people and to the international community that not just the United States, but the entire West is just it's useless. No matter how you try to cooperate with them, I know some people dislike what the Iranian government did and how it negotiated, and some people expect that Iran, for Iran not to negotiate and just say get out of here or get lost or something like that. But that's not the smart way forward. The Iranians, they knew this would happen. They knew that Witkoff was constantly moving the goalposts. They knew that nothing would come of it. At least those who I know were convinced of that, and I didn't never believe that we would get to a deal with them. And the same was true with the IAEA. But the point is that you have to be able to convince people, as many people as possible across the world and at home, that you've done whatever is possible. If, for example, Iran had refused to initially Iran did refuse to negotiate, and then the Americans changed their tone and attitude, and then the Iranians agreed to indirect negotiations. But if Iran hadn't done so, then these Persian media outlets and Western media, these Persian media outlets in the West that are controlled by Western intelligence agencies like BBC Persian and Iran International and Manoto and all these other media outlets that are run by Western agents, but and mercenaries. But they in the Western media would have said, well, if Iran had negotiated, this wouldn't have happened. So the Iranians, in order to prevent that from being able to convince even a segment of society that this was the case, they took that, they took the extra step and exposed them. And as I said, with the IAEA, that they did the same. So negotiating with Americans, I think it's clear that now for Iranians and others that it's useless. And in the case of Trump, nothing that he says is reliable. He wakes up the next morning and says something completely different. Remember when during the 12-day, all people have to do is just go over his post during the 12-day war of aggression and see how inconsistent and unstable he is, and how every one moment he was threatening the leader, then he was talking about regime change. What does this have to do with the nuclear program? And then, of course, when things went bad for the Israeli regime, then ultimately he had to acknowledge that those Iranian missiles were, hitting them hard. And Steve Bannon admitted or pointed out on his show that that Trump had to save Netanyahu because they were losing the war so badly. And as we move forward, more and more information is coming out about the damage that Iran did to the regime, which is hidden by the collective West and Western media because they're all in bed together.
We had Benjamin Netanyahu visiting the United States. And I think he's been to the United States 5 times since Donald Trump was elected. And this time, it seems that Donald Trump and the Trump administration is trying to balance the situation because of I don't know, the two-state solution that they're talking about. And right now, Donald Trump has a peace plan. And he says that it seems that the outcome of the peace plan is somehow capitulate or die in Gaza. That there is no other option for Hamas, for the people in Gaza. And looking at moments ago, before coming up to this live, we've learned from Netanyahu, he published a video in Hebrew. He said that they're not going to withdraw from Gaza. So what does that mean? What does the peace plan mean if they're not going to withdraw from Gaza?
Well, as I said earlier, Netanyahu is in a weak position, and I think that this could also be a reason for him to attack Iran because he's in a very tough spot. He's not winning the war in Gaza. Nima, he's killing a lot of people every day. He's slaughtering women and children. They're exterminating Palestinians. This is an extermination project. Hundreds of thousands have been killed. Hundreds of thousands. Remember, many people are under rubble. Many people have died of illness, of cancer, of diseases, or are dying of different diseases that would be easily cured under normal circumstances. But they die because there's no medicine and there's no food and there are no facilities to treat them. So he's successful in slaughtering these people, and the Israelis support this. They like this extermination of the Palestinian people, and the Europeans and the Americans, they support this. Let's not be naive. They support this. You haven't seen any single European country sanction the Israeli military or the Israeli government or the regime or anything like that. Maybe one or two individuals have been sanctioned. They don't care, or they won't be allowed to enter a particular country. But cooperation with the Israeli regime, enabling the Israeli regime to carry out this Holocaust, continues. And the BBC, Sky News, the New York Times, the Guardian, the Washington Post, Breitbart, Fox News, they're all in bed together. And big tech, all of them are on the side of this Holocaust. And we are living in a true dystopia. The West has created a global dystopia. But Netanyahu, despite all that, is in a very difficult situation. The war is not going well. He is not going to be able to take Gaza. And we've seen Trump make these threats before to Hamas and to the resistance, but to no effect, because they know that submission means death. And they know that the United States and the Israeli regime are lying, that Trump is lying, and that Netanyahu is dying. Some say that Trump sees Netanyahu as politically weak, and so this peace plan may be an effort to put pressure on him to end the war. I don't see it that way. I don't think Trump is going to put any real pressure on Netanyahu, and I think when the Israeli regime attacks Iran, Trump will be right there to support Netanyahu, just like he supports him every day, every hour of the day. Remember, he just said that no president has ever supported Israel like I have, and there's no sign that that is going to change. But now that Netanyahu is weak and his position vulnerable, I think that as in the past, whenever he's in a very bad situation, he seeks escalation, and that's why I think that it's possible that he could attack Iran shortly. I'm not saying it will happen, but you saw that the president, said that if something happens to me, there'll be people to replace me. And although I'm not in government or anything like that, after the show, I should give you a few names of some people that you can have on your show in case I'm not available in future. But uh, the Iranians are not going to be intimidated. They're not going to be defeated, and they're prepared. But I have no doubt the next time that Netanyahu attacks Iran, Trump will be there for him. The governments across Europe, Canada, Australia, New Zealand will be there for Netanyahu and to help him with his extermination campaign. And you'll see that Erdogan, being the traitor that I have always said he is, he will continue to betray the cause, and so will Qatar, and so will other countries that pretend to care for the Palestinian people, but they will do nothing to support them. And remember, all of this is about Palestine. Iran's sin is that it opposes the extermination of the Palestinian people. It opposes uh, the displacement of the Palestinian population. It opposes apartheid. That's its sin. That has been its sin for sorting all the anti-Iranian propaganda or anti-Ansarullah or anti-Hezbollah propaganda for the last few decades is all about the West's support for genocide and apartheid and Iran's opposition to that. And I think people are waking up to that reality.
Professor Marandi, do you think that you mentioned Australia, Canada, maybe Europe would somehow help Israel in their attack on Iran, but how can they feel or think that this time around going to be different from the war they had?
It won't be different, but it will be worse, I think, for the Israeli regime. The Iranians will hit harder, but that's just who they are. They are in the pockets of the neocons and the Zionists, which are one and the same, as I said. Australia uh, sanctions Iran, but it won't sanction the and on makes false accusations in doing so in order to justify it. But there's a Holocaust being carried out, and they won't sanction Israel. The same is true with New Zealand or Canada or all these countries or Turkey. Turkey does business as usual. They're still doing trade. They're still transporting oil, cheap oil from Baku to Israel after 2 years of genocide. Jordan, Egypt, or as since the Red Sea has been closed by Ansarullah and the Yemeni armed forces and the people of Yemen, we see that those goods, or many of those goods, go through the Arabian Peninsula to Jordan and then to Palestine. So it doesn't have to be like a military uh, force deployed in Palestine for them to be supportive of the regime. It's just helping the regime through business, through trade, through political cover, and so on to get by. And the recognition of a Palestinian state is not an act against the regime, even though not all of these countries did it. It's only in order to silence their own populations that are becoming increasingly angry. Otherwise, recognizing Palestine on a piece of paper means nothing. As we speak, you know, and I know, and so does your audience, we all know that they're ethnically cleansing the West Bank. They're killing people almost on a daily basis. Sometimes they kill multiple people, but on average, they're killing people on a daily basis. Just today, I think someone died as a result of terror and harassment in the West Bank. So they're ethnically cleansing parts of the West Bank. They're occupying new parts of Syria, and of course, the Jolani regime is hell bent on doing a deal with the Israeli regime. We saw them meet senior people closely affiliated to Israel, to the Netanyahu regime in the United States, and he and his regime continue to attack Syrians, but they won't dare attack the Israeli regime. They won't dare respond to their airstrikes, their murderous airstrikes. They're just, all they can do is kill ordinary people. Why? Because it was the CIA that brought them to power. So the West and these countries in the region, by continuing to do business with the Israeli regime, they're part of the problem and not the solution, to say the least.
I think it seems to me, Professor Marandi, that the project of two-state solution is somehow a project of buying time for Israel in order to annex. Look at what's going on in the West Bank. It's some pinpoints on the map, and how you can talk about two-state solution. And Mahmoud Abbas is a project in the West Bank. He's somehow facilitating the process of settlers coming to the land. They're talking about Mahmoud Abbas now being in charge of the whole Palestine. So it's going to facilitate, gradually give all the land to Israelis. Is that the main goal?
Well, Mahmoud Abbas is like the house slave that Malcolm X would speak about, or the brown sahib, or the Orientalized Oriental, and the people around him. They're all corrupted, and so obviously, having him in charge of anything is basically to empower the Israeli regime. He's their jailer. Uh, this process in the West Bank is going to continue until the West Bank is ethnically cleansed, and they rid the area of Palestinians. And it will then continue, will go on to Jordan, because this is an expansionist regime. They want Lebanon. They want, when Netanyahu spoke about Greater Israel, what was he talking about? He wasn't talking about um, um, expanding Israel into the Mediterranean. He was talking about the Sinai, about Jordan, about parts of Saudi Arabia, Syria, Lebanon, Iraq, bits of Turkey. But right now they're busy with the West Bank. So their hope is to get rid of the Gazans and then move on to the West Bank. And well, not move on. They're actually, during the last 2 years, they've been doing this. But Western journalists are quiet about it. Western diplomats in Palestine, they're quiet about it. They don't want to rock the boat. They don't want people to know about this because it's very embarrassing for them. So this process, the two-state solution, was always, as you said, it was always a lie from day one. It was that, and that's what the Iranians were saying from the beginning. That, look, we don't accept the two-state solution because that would mean that you would have apartheid in most of Palestine, and that is not morally legitimate. And that the people who've been ethnically cleansed and are alive in camps across the region, that they have no right of return. That's not morally acceptable. But assuming that we did accept the two-state solution, it's never going to happen. It's never going to happen, and they've been proven right. And what the Israeli regime did from the very beginning was that it brought in the most ruthless and extreme people into the West Bank. The settlers the colonizers of the West Bank are the worst of the worst. No Israeli government is ever going to force these people to leave. They were put there to make sure that they never leave. That was the whole point. That's why they put in the most extreme of their people there. So the two-state solution was always a facade. And the West knew this, the Europeans knew this. This was just to buy time. It was just to make the problem go away so that the Israeli regime could do what it does silently. Western media in order use this in order to be apologetic and to draw attention away from the reality in Palestine. Because as we know, this did not begin on October the 7th. October the 7th was a reaction to many decades of genocide and slaughter and murder. And those who tried to use October the 7th as a tool to help the Israeli regime, they are genocide enablers. And they know it. By now, they all know it. I remember when I was on uh, I'd go on television like many others, and they'd speak about October the 7th. After many weeks and months, they all knew that the whole uh, beheaded babies and rape allegations, they were all lies because they couldn't produce any evidence. There were no names, there were no footage, there was nothing. There was no footage at all. But they continue to repeat it, and they still do because they are genocide enablers. They are partners in this Holocaust. They are a part of this extermination campaign. Every single one of these journalists and politicians and elites and think tankers and diplomats that use this lie, and we're approaching October the 7th, so you're going to see this a lot in the coming days. They are all genocidal. They are all partners in this genocide. Each and every one of them who uses this is a genocide enabler.
We had New York Times reported based on a new poll, 7 out of 10 American voters under 30 oppose additional economic and military aid to Israel. I think this is the crucial point for Israel and what's going on in the United States. Huge changes are happening. With the case of Charlie Kirk, you see the guy who's replacing Charlie Kirk is so much pro-Israel, and they're trying to reshape the movement to influence these people that New York Times is talking about them. And do you think that the project will be successful? Are they going to be able to do that?
No, because Nima, Americans are now recognizing that Zionists control them at home as well. They're in charge. They own America, and therefore they own them. They're not allowed to even use TikTok. Their information is going to be controlled. The way in which they speak will be controlled. Academics will not be able to speak anymore about what? About a Holocaust, about ethnic cleansing, about ethno-supremacism. These are off limits. It's not about, like, I don't know, the United States, the injustices that they do at home, or I don't know, violating someone's rights or killing an African American person because of his color. Or no, this is like institutional racism, open racism, uh, ethno supremacism. It's out there in the open, and extermination that's being carried out with American weapons and American political support and media support. And ordinary Americans, if they say we don't like this, they get into trouble. And so now they don't have they've lost their freedoms, and they're in the process of losing their freedoms because of Zionists. So not only is this about Palestine and about a genocide that's being done with their taxpayer money, but it's also impacting the way they live in their own country. So every single day that we move forward, this is going to get worse for the Israeli regime. And that's why the situation is so difficult for Netanyahu. And that is another reason why I think Netanyahu will move to attack Iran. And you will see how Western media will justify it. You will see how they speak about sleeper cells. Remember that? How CNN and some other media outlets were talking about how the Iranians have sleeper cells in the United States and how they. So what CNN was doing, CNN, which hates Trump, they were demonizing Iranian Americans in order to justify a genocide, in order to create fear in America so that Americans would not question the war, the unprovoked war against Iran. So CNN is just as horrible as Fox News, but it's just maybe a bit more sophisticated, less bombastic. But and these Iranian Americans, as well as I, many of them have always been non-political because they don't want to get into trouble. But now their fingers pointed at them, and many of them don't even have, they're married to a non-Iranian. They don't even speak Persian at home. Their children don't speak Persian, or their parents were from Iran. And so all these people are somehow accused. Why? For the sake of the Israeli regime. That's CNN. That's not Fox News. So the next time the Israeli regime attacks, you're going to see the same thing. You're going to see Sky News justify it. And when they strike apartment buildings and slaughter and massacre people, and let's say some official is there, they're going to call this an intelligence coup. They're not going to call it a massacre, a war crime, because they're all in it together. So but people are waking up to this reality. People are seeing through this. It's getting worse for the Israeli regime. The more they try to tighten the screws, shutting down TikTok, young people will become more hostile. And by trying to replace Charlie Kirk, regardless of who he really was and who killed him, and that all that aside, when they try to replace him with someone who's a more rabid Zionist, it's not going to help. It's going to make it worse. As I said, these people, remember early on, and I think I said that these people are becoming increasingly irrational. The empire, as it declines, they're becoming more irrational, more foolish. And the way in which they treat their own people is becoming more foolish. So it's not going to end well for the regime, but it's going to be dangerous. This is a very dangerous phase. Any sort of outrage could take place, but Iran is ready. And Iran, the axis of resistance is not going to relinquish the Palestinian people. I have no doubt about that. Iran will remain steadfast. Hezbollah will remain steadfast. It's really interesting how some people in our region are constantly attacking Hezbollah, but they're not attacking the people. And so these are so-called supporters of Palestine. They're not really. They're paid. They work for Qatar, or they're funded by Qatar, and there are many different cultural and media institutions, or the Saudis or the Emiratis, but they pretend that they support Palestine, and they support the CIA project in Syria, which it's turned out to be exactly as we predicted, and it's the exact opposite what they were claiming. But they're attacking now. They constantly attack Hezbollah, but they don't attack the people who are trying to disarm Hezbollah. So, but Hezbollah is going to remain steadfast. Ansarullah will remain steadfast. Iran will remain steadfast. Netanyahu will not win. This may be bloody, but it's going to again show the limits of Western power. And it's going to make the West more hated. It's going to make Zionism more hated. And it's going to make Iran and the axis of resistance more popular. I have no doubt about that. It's going to be hard. People will die. Many people believe that the Israelis are going to be more brutal and ruthless in the next war against Iran. And we're all prepared. We are prepared to make the sacrifices to protect our country, to protect our people, and to protect our friends and allies. But they will not win. They can kill, but they won't win.
Have you ever imagined that an Al Qaeda and ISIS, leader would be at the UN talking, and General Petraeus calling him, you have many fans on one of them, and your success is our success. What does that mean when he says your success is our success? He knows that he's killing Al Jolani, Al Shara is killing many people in Syria, slaughtering people in Syria, doctors, nurses, everybody there.
Because of this conference that I'm at, I couldn't go to the ceremony in Beirut. I really wanted to be there for Sayyid Hassan Nasrullah's um, the gathering, and I'm I'm very disappointed that I didn't go. But this is what he predicted. This is what he said all along since 2011 and 12. That's what he was saying. And these people who were sectarian and funded by these sectarian regimes, they're not sectarian regimes, they're American clients, whether NATO members or oil and gas rich regimes, uh, they're client states. And he was saying that this would happen all along. It's in many of his speeches, he pointed this out. It was clear where Al Qaeda came from. It was clear where ISIS came from. And Petraeus was one of the people in charge of all this. He knows exactly who Jolani is. He knows who Baghdadi was. He knows what these groups are. And the evidence that the Defense Intelligence Agency document of 2012, the leaked audio of Kerry at the UN, the email from Jake Sullivan to Hillary Clinton. The list goes on. Obama's interview with the Atlantic, I think, about Iraq. The evidence is out there. As anyone who wants to have open eyes, it's clear what this was all about from the beginning. But some people, because of their hatred for Iran, whether many people in the West and the left, this irrational hatred that they've had for decades, uh, uh, and many people who've been taught to be sectarian and hateful and who spread misinformation and disinformation about Iran and the resistance, they close their eyes to this reality due to their spite and hatred. But all they've done is that they've together collectively hurt the cause of the Palestinian people. And they continue to do so, those who close their eyes. Those who open their eyes and have the courage to try to rectify what they've done, to try to make up for the damage that they've caused, good for them. But there are still those who want to keep their eyes closed because it's in their interests, in their financial interests, and it's also their arrogance that prevents them from seeing this reality. But Sayyid Hassan Nasrallah, Ayatollah Khamenei, they've been saying this repeatedly, and General Soleimani and others, they all knew what this was about, and they knew that if someone like Jolani came to power, that this would happen. He was their man from day one. There was never any doubt about this. Why would anyone be surprised? The only thing that surprises me is how open they are about it now, and how open Jolani is about it, and how his supporters in Syria are okay with it as they continue to beat up people in Syria and kill people and steal their homes and so on. Uh, they don't do much about it or anything about it.
Yeah, we've seen all the Arab states coming out and condemning Israeli attack on Doha. Yesterday, they said that Netanyahu called Qatar, the Emir of Qatar, and he apologized for what has happened. Do you think that what's going on with the Arab states, are they intimidated with the attack on Qatar? Are they somehow, yeah, I'm talking about in the intimidation, just somehow forcing them into Abraham Accords? Or how do you see the situation with the Abraham Accords? Because the peace plan, in my opinion, is all about the Abraham Accords and what they're trying to do for Israel in the region. And how do you
So,
find the response of the Arab states?
well, first of all, the phone call after it took place, then what happened? The Qatar is now is cooperating with Americans to get Hamas to accept the deal. And look at the letter that was published online, signed by a number of countries, including Qatar and Erdogan. It's basically to put pressure on Hamas to capitulate, to give more concessions. Arab countries should be fearful of the United States and the Israeli regime, and they are. But the problem is that they put all their eggs in the American camp, and so is Erdogan. I mean, he pretends that he's playing off different, but he's NATO. He's NATO. There's nothing. He's just a player in NATO, and everything that he's been doing over the years is within the framework of NATO interests. But in across the region, they are fearful. But since they put all their eggs in the American basket, what else can they do? As soon as Qatar was bombed, where did the foreign minister go, or the prime minister? Straight to the United States and to have dinner with Witkoff and Trump. Is that how you run a country? Is that how you create leverage? What is he going to do? Give another plane to Trump? So the problem is that these countries are unwilling to take a stand, unwilling to move away. They continue to export oil. They continue to purchase gas. They continue to do trade. They continue to have the Israeli flag and embassies and Israelis come and go. And so, and then when these countries do this, how can you expect African countries and governments to break off ties with the Israeli regime when regional countries won't do it? How can you expect Latin American countries to break off ties with the Israeli regime when these governments won't do it? I mean, the Colombian government, the Colombian president is far more courageous than these countries that signed on to that letter supporting Trump's plan, his so-called peace plan or his capitulation plan. This is the situation that we have. But again, I think that this is still the Israelis are losing. The world has turned against them, and we're going to see what happens. They're going to attack the flotilla. That's not going to look for. I mean, people should be focused on the flotilla right now because soon they're going to attack them. And what is the flotilla all about? It's baby formula. It's baby formula. It's just food and some medicine on some small boats, and they don't want those to get in. Why? Because it's an extermination project. It's all about extermination. So everyone should be focused on this right now because we have to make the Israeli regime. I mean, they've taken TikTok and they're buying off everything, but we have to raise our voices as much as possible to make this as costly as possible for the regime. When they attack Iran, we have to be steadfast and we have to make it costly for the regime. Every baby that's killed in Gaza, we have to make it costly for the regime as much as possible. And I have no doubt that we're heading in the right direction. The blood of these children, whether the children of Hezbollah or the children in Yemen or the innocents in Iran, that blood is not going to be that spilt blood is not going to be forgotten, let alone the blood of all the children in Gaza, women who are being massacred every day. That's not going to be forgotten. So we have to raise our voices and make them pay for each baby that starves in Gaza. And that's if we cannot do more than that, that's what we have to do. If anyone can do more, then they have to do more.
And here is, Professor, in terms of the starvation in Gaza, here is what Tom Fletcher, UN official, said to the CNN.
It's dying of starvation, effectively their bodies consuming their own organs, what we give them to try and avoid that is this kind of high protein peanut butter
Yes, I
paste.
know what it is,
And
yeah.
we've been told we can't bring peanut butter in because it's a luxury, because Hamas might try to steal the peanut butter. So we are on the border every day arguing. Seriously, we are fighting to get our convoys through. We're getting a little bit more in now, but it is still a drop in the ocean. And what we're seeing in Gaza City is utterly horrendous. And again, people who've been displaced time and time again, the lucky people are the ones living under tents. The lucky people are the people who can escape, but we're there. We will stay and deliver. We've got our colleagues remaining in Gaza City to save as many lives as we can and to bear witness and testimony to what we see.
Yeah, Professor Marandi, the situation in Gaza, I think, is, as you've mentioned, is of particular importance right now. The starvation is one of the worst thing that could happen to any nation on earth. That is happening to people in Gaza. And do you feel that this situation would somehow improve? They're trying to do something, the UN and those people who are trying to give to help the people in Gaza. He said that a situation, a biological situation, that an organ goes attacking the other organ, it's unbelievable. What's your understanding of that?
Yeah, I tweeted this, I think yesterday too. It's the, and it's all Hamas. They'll use the word Hamas, and their Western apologists will use Hamas. And now, these regional countries are saying, agree to this and have Hamas and the resistance leave Gaza. It's just amazing. But it just shows how evil this regime is and how illegitimate it is. And why is Iran? Remember, when the war against Iran starts, whenever it does, remember that this is all about the fact that Ayatollah Khamenei, like Sayyid Hassan Nasrallah, and like the military and the leadership and the political establishment in Iran and the people of Iran, oppose the starvation of the Palestinian people. At the conference that I'm at, I met this academic from one of the countries in our region. He said that people in my country are laughing at Iran. I don't know. I think that I think that he's probably speaking about the ruling elites in his country. But I think that you can only praise the Iranians and Ansarullah and Hezbollah, because these are the ones who are making the sacrifices for the Palestinian people. They have been steadfast, they've been honorable, and they've been paying a price. The Iranians have been paying a price for almost 50 years. And it's time for people across the world to wake up to that reality. And the Iranians are not, as I said earlier, they're not going to give up on the Palestinian people. It's not going to happen. They're not going to give up on Gaza. Well, you know as well as I, and so does your audience, that the resistance in Gaza is due to the heroism of the Palestinian people, but it's also the Iranians who are assisting. It's the Iranians who are getting supplies into Gaza to help them build tunnels, to help them be able to defend their land more adequately. And Iran's not going to stop. Iran's going to continue helping Ansarullah and Hezbollah and all those who are out there to support the Palestinian people. And Iran paid the price, and it will continue to pay the price, but the Israeli regime is losing. Nima, Israel has lost this war. Israel has been exposed for what it is, and its apologists and supporters have been exposed for what they are. And young people across the world have seen this reality. And those who cling on to this image, this fake image of Israel being, in the United States being the good guys, these are older people who are not going to be around much longer. 65 and above are still trapped in their foolish narratives on our region. But younger people have all woken up. Every single day that goes by, this antagonism, this hostility towards Zionism and apartheid and ethno supremacism and ethnic cleansing and genocide the hostility towards this will only increase. They can shut down free speech. They can shut down TikTok and YouTube. They can close they've shut down my accounts everywhere. All I have is a Twitter account. They can shut that down. They can shut us all down, but it's too late. Everything is clear as day now.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Professor Marandi, for being with us today. Great
Thank
pleasure
you,
as
Nima.
always.
It's an honor. Thank you.